This review is not going to go the way you think. How is it going to go? Find out when Johnny Torch reviews The Last Jedi. Hi ho everyone, once again this is Johnny Torch Live, number 41, bringing to you my Johnny Torch review of Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. And boy, this movie was something. I'm still not sure what, but it was something. We're not doing a live broadcast, so to speak. I am taping this live at midnight here on the East Coast, midnight mass, if you will, for Star Wars. And we got a lot to talk about. This was a long movie, a very long movie, and we're going to get into it. And I'll give you my thoughts on exactly what was going on here with The Last Jedi. All right, so starting off, as I said, it was a long movie. It was a very long movie, and I think that it probably could have benefited from about a good that's taken out of it. There was a lot of false endings, I thought. There was a lot of times where I thought it would have made a good ending to the film, and the film just went on. It's a very different feeling Star Wars movie. It didn't feel like Star Wars in a way to me. Um, all right, so let's just get to the beginning. We'll try to go through it from beginning to end, and I don't have a lot of notes, so I'm going to go through just off memory. I got my notes pulled up here. Going to touch base on all the important plot lines here for the next hour, probably about an hour, maybe a little longer. And we're going to look at some of these things that happen systematically. All right, where should we start? All right, let's start with the beginning. Let's go straight to the beginning. Now, the movie picks up roughly where the last movie left off. The Starfleet is trying to get away from the First Order. It was mildly humorous. We had Poe, sarcastic comments to Hux. And it was a good action scene to kick the whole thing off with. Poe's taking out the cannons on the dreadnought. Pretty exciting stuff. That was a decent way to open the picture. I mean, they left you wanting to see what was going on between Luke and Rey. Get us there that fast. I'm gonna break it down here to the characters. First, let's start with Poe. I don't really feel that Poe was given a whole lot of justice here. Now, to be honest with you, Poe is my favorite character of the new characters from the Force Awakens. I thought Poe was the best, at least the most enjoyable to me. I mean, I liked all of them. I liked John Boyega. I liked Daisy Ridley. This is not a slight against them, of course, but Poe kind of struck me as sort of the new Han Solo, and I don't think there is coincidence in the fact that he was wearing a very Han Solo-ish Empire Strikes Back style jacket in this movie, pretty much for the most of it. But let's start with the plot line of the Resistance trying to get away from the First Order fleet. That was one of the few things that seemed to harken back to The Empire Strikes Back. We all know The Force Awakens took it on the chin for being a basically beat by beat remake of A New Hope. I don't feel that this was in any way a beat by beat remake of The Empire Strikes Back. There were certainly similarities. Um, One, of course, being Luke and Rey, and Luke being sort of on his own Dagobah. But the other glaring uh, comparison is probably the scene with not a scene, but it's basically throughout the whole film where the Resistance is trying to get away from the First Order. It takes the whole movie basically where it's a slow speed chase, basically. And again, this is something else that felt like it dragged on way too long. Most of the films and most of the scenes in this film did drag on way too long. This had the of making me more appreciative of J.J. Abrams and the way he filmed The Force Awakens. That was filmed like a Star Wars movie. There was urgency. There was the focus was on the right thing. It wasn't taking too much time with the plot lines. As I said here, it felt like they could have cut out a great many things, to quote one Darth Sidious, and the film would have been better for it. And we'll get to those things too in a moment, but I think part of it was probably the long dragged out chase. Now, continuing to talk about Poe, I don't think they did justice to him. They didn't do right by him because they make you think that he's doing the right thing. Now he's coming into opposition with um what's her name? Admiral Holden, I believe, is the character. I actually didn't write down her name of all the characters, so I'll bring her up here so you know who I'm talking about, but I'm sure everybody knows Laura Dern's character. Um he comes into opposition against her, and we're supposedly going to side with Poe because, you know, he's he's someone we're familiar with. He's Resistance hero and stuff. We never heard of Laura Dern's character, this Admiral Holden. Then the film goes out of their way to show us that Princess Leia was in fact on Holden's side, and Poe pretty much looks like an idiot because he's doing this great plan and mutiny in order to try to facilitate Finn and Rose, and Leia pretty much literally shoots him down, literally. And it's a very convoluted feeling that you don't know who is in the right in this case. Now, at first I thought maybe Holden was, an Imperial plant or a First Order plant or whatever, same difference. Then I thought maybe they were just trying to show her as an ineffective leader because a lot of this plot line harkened back to like Battlestar Galactica for me, where you have, the Authority trying to tag fleet, so to speak, and check and make sure they're all in line, and a very different feeling for Star Wars. Star Wars was never about, oh, we need fuel and there has to be, you know, a plan of keeping the fleet in line and stuff. It was a very different feeling plot. And I didn't feel very connected to it at all, and I don't think it worked very well. Um, of course, you have Holden's death, which we're kind of jumping all over the place here, but and it was a decent action scene, but it really didn't hold any resonance because we really didn't know where she was coming from through this whole film, and it was kind of difficult to get a gauge on what the character was supposed to represent. Um, Authority that's unworthy, authority that's not tested. They gave some backstory to her being some kind of leader of some kind of movement. You know, I don't know. It was very difficult to try to get with her character. I'm not sure exactly what they were trying to do with her, but anyway. So right off the bat, there we go. Poe. I don't think Poe was really done justice really in this film either. Especially after the last movie when I was kind of hoping that they would focus on him more. They don't really get to him and give him a whole lot to work with. They separated him from BB-8, which was another thing I thought was a little unusual to say the least. Let's move in now with Finn and Rose's plan. This is their portion of the story. Part of the story that really could have been edited down a lot. Uh, I didn't dislike Finn, and I don't dislike Finn, and I didn't dislike Rose. Um, we get sort of thrown into her, you know, um, sphere when her sister dies, and then we pick up with her when Finn tries to leave after he comes out of his coma to try to contact Rey. Uh, she was an interesting character. I thought she was all right. I mean, you know, it's another one of those things where she just gets like thrust into the action almost the same way Finn was. in the Force Awakens. I like the meeting between the two. I thought Finn got a pretty good comedic scene there, and it harkened back to the Force Awakens. This is a very different Finn from that point on in this movie. It's a more determined Finn. I suppose it's a character arc for him to not be so goofy and to be more seen as a competent leader. I preferred him more as a comical type character, but you know, character growth that we're aiming toward here, I suppose they accomplished it. So the plan is for them to go to the Dreadnought, I believe, is the Star Cruiser that they're going to shut off the tracking beam that is continually. And they go to the casino planet, which was, interesting enough. It was a decent. It looked like sort of kind of a half-hearted attempt at what they did in the last movie with Maz's bar. And I don't know, quite frankly, they went off on some kind of flight of fancy there when they did the horse stampede. It was very unusual because it felt like it felt a little too heavy-handed, like they were trying to put some kind of message into the film, where Star Wars has had messages, but it never really seemed to be so blatantly, let's stop the whole of action in order to focus on this one element that is kind of unrelated to the whole storyline, but let's focus on it anyway. So you had the whole horse stampede thing, kind of didn't make sense. It really wasn't needed. You got the stable boys or whatever that was. That also, 20 minutes could have just been cut out. Just could have just been cut out. Then we meet DJ, the Benicio del Toro character. I thought he was a very interesting character. Kind of did the boss nass with him. Kind of strange speech impediment. Please, like a Roger Rabbit meets James Dean. I don't know. An interesting character, and I liked that they caught up with him, and it turned into a deviation from the original plan. Having gone that far, though, when they actually get to the Imperial ship and he sells them out, it really felt disappointing because I felt they had a potentially great character there, but it was sort of like, well, this is, Benicio del Toro's, exit stage left. We never see him again. We really don't know what happens to him. I guess he dies on the ship. Maybe he takes off on an Imperial ship to leave, or he takes the stolen ship. I don't know, but it just was a very awkward exit stage left for him. I was disappointed that they didn't really do something better with the character of DJ. And, like I said, I suppose he wasn't meant to stay in the movie that long. But this movie was very problematic when it came to plot lines coming and going, and it muddled a lot of questions that we wanted answered, and some of them were definitely not answered. I want to get to another thing because this happened around this point in the movie. Again, we're jumping around. I'm just trying to do some character stuff here. But we had the first curse words in a Star Wars film, and that upset me because there's no need to go there. George Lucas never went there because this is supposed to be a fairy tale. This is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. We're not supposed to talk like it's modern day Earth. Um, and for some reason they decided to go there. I'm not particularly sure why. They wanted to bump the rating up, maybe. I don't know. Maybe they just thought it was cool and edgy. I don't know. But it felt out of step with the rest of the Star Wars films. When you do something out of line like that, it's going to be apparent. Um, it just didn't feel right. I think they could just have cut that scene where Finn says the one word. I'm not going to say it. They could have cut that, and nothing would have been lost. Nothing at all would have been lost. Um, Poe also says something that is also a mild curse word that, probably didn't need to be there either. But again, see, it's just it doesn't feel like Star Wars when you do little things like that. All right, let me go on to the end of this scene now, where we're talking about Finn's Finn and Rose's subplot. So we had the return of Captain Phasma. Captain Phasma, not particularly that effective here. Now, this is another character, much like not quite the same as Poe, but I mean someone that was not really given their full due in the Force Awakens, and you kind of wanted to see them come back, more powerful, more popular, more having something to do. Uh, and we kind of got this scene of in the trailers and stuff of Finn doing battle with Phasma. And we thought it was going to be a battle to end all battles, and it was going to be, sort of Finn's coming of age type moment, a rite of passage or something. But it kind of felt lacking. It kind of felt lacking, especially because Phasma really has no personality, no character. She just comes in and strides in the great looking uniform, and then just is there for the fight scene and then leaves. You know what I mean? It's like almost the same thing as the Force Awakens. In this case, apparently she's killed. They missed out on an opportunity to really put some weight on the character. Um, like by comparison, Boba Fett, I suppose, is the analog to what they were trying to do with Phasma. She's supposed to be sort of flashy and getting the job done, but at the same time being pretty silent and mysterious. It just doesn't seem to work with Phasma here, and it just seemed like a giant wasted opportunity. It also seemed like a wasted opportunity that they didn't use Phasma to sort of underscore Finn's story. Finn had a fairly interesting story in The Force Awakens. They didn't go back to it, that he had a family that he never knew. Apparently, that's something also, a storyline that goes on with Rey, but the thing is here, they never focused on it with Finn. And I guess it's because they're focusing on it so much with Rey, but you would think that Finn would be trying to get answers from Phasma as to his origin, as to his family and his story. But instead, it was just like a quick bang bang, a couple of fight moves later, and Phasma's gone, and she's probably not going to be missed. So kind of again a missed opportunity, and you'll hear as this review goes on that there are several such missed opportunities in this film, and that's kind of the problem. All right, so let's get to this Leia. I think that's the we're trying to take the characters a little bit one at a time, and so we did sort of the Poe, the Finn, the Rose element of the film. That was kind of the weaker elements for me. Then we have Princess Leia, i.e. General Leia, who they're general. But a very different performance here from Carrie Fisher, I think. Of course, this is Carrie Fisher's final performance, tragically passing on about a year ago now. And it felt like a different performance from The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens felt more like the Leia of the old trilogy, the original trilogy. This Leia felt a little bit more, uh, I don't know, maybe world weary, so to speak. Understandably, because she just lost Han Solo, and now she finds out that her son is not only the killer of Han Solo, but potentially the biggest threat to the galaxy. And you can feel that emotional weight more on her. It didn't really, do the character any favors. I mean, she's her pretty much through the whole film. But she did a good job. Carrie Fisher did a good performance here. Not taking anything away from that. So her big scene is at the beginning. The TIE fighters, or whatever you want to call them, will bombard the ship, and it's whether or not Kylo is going to blow her up. And Kylo, of course, got a dressing down by Snoke, and in a move that was disappointing to me, he forgoes the helmet, doesn't wear the helmet anymore, and smashes the helmet. And then he goes off to prove that he can still do the job for the dark side. And he hesitates. He doesn't kill Leia. An interesting move. I mean, considering the rest of the film, that was an interesting move. That he couldn't do it. And of course, his co-pilots, his henchmen, or whatever you want to call them, end up doing it for him, blowing up, a significant part of the bridge and killing Admiral Akbar. Which, you know, let's take a moment here. Time out. Rest in peace, Admiral Akbar. I mean, thankless death. I mean, it's acknowledged briefly in the film, but they got other things to do, so they really don't acknowledge that. He was an important member of the Rebel Alliance, and he goes way back. And of course, he was the second highest ranking member. Then, of course, it goes to Holden, the chain of command. But yeah, sad that they killed off Admiral Akbar. I believe Tim Rose um, was from the original Return of the Jedi performer, was still performing him. I think I seen the credits. I only seen the film once, by the way. I'm just going from memory. Um, so that was sad. Uh, but so Leia gets sucked out into the vacuum of space, and it's sort of a tease because knowing that Carrie Fisher has passed on, you think it's very possible that they're going to kill off Leia in this instance, in this way. Uh, Surprisingly, she survives, even though the rest of the bridge blows up. She survives to be out in the vacuum of space and not be ash and cinder. Um, but I'll buy it because I liked seeing Leia use the Force. Now, my requirements of this film was I wanted to see Princess Leia use the Force in some capacity, in a grand capacity. I didn't just want to see her levitate a book across the room. I wanted to see her do something big because if Return of the Jedi said anything about her future, Luke said that she would learn to use the Force as he did. So it was important to me that they gave her some kind of display of Force power. And they did, and she ends up using the Force to bring herself back from the vacuum of space into the ship. And of course, the strain puts her in a coma for the film, which leads to as I said, with the aforementioned um, thing with Holden and Poe and everything. Uh, Difficult. So we'll tie it into that storyline. It's difficult though, so to see that Leia sides with Holden and stuns Poe. I don't really know that Leia was right. That's what makes this a difficult, convoluted plot. We're supposed to side with Poe, we think, because he's doing the right thing to protect the fleet. He's doing the right thing to get Finn as much time as he needs to get on the ship with Rose and disable the tracking thing and stuff. But then Leia sides with Holden. And in her doing so, they take uh, transports that have no shielding and no artillery, and they're basically getting picked off. They're getting picked off. If they started with 30, they ended with 5. I mean, it really wasn't the best plan. And you kind of think, well, wasn't Poe right all along? But one would think the judgment of Leia, who was a leader in the Rebel Alliance and now in the Resistance for, why would she make the wrong call? I mean, did she make the wrong call? We're supposed to think that this was the right thing to do, even though they're down to like maybe a quarter of the ships they had. It's like I said, a very convoluted plot line between Poe, Leia, and Holden. I just think they could have simplified it and made it a little more straightforward because in the end, it really didn't facilitate anything. Finn and Rose are captured. They never end up getting the tracking system deactivated. Um, the fleet ends up getting decimated because Leia and Holden's plan. I don't know if it fails, but it doesn't really succeed. And so it's like all those subplots are like a pretty convoluted mess, really. I should also take this opportunity to talk about a couple of things in relation to the storyline. We got a cameo of Maz Kanata. Didn't need it. I don't ever want to see her again. Totally honest with you. All cards on the table. I never really cared for Maz, and I don't need to see her again. Didn't need to see her here, but she did no harm. I don't know. And we also had a lot of minor stuff with Billy Lord, who is Carrie Fisher's daughter. I don't know what her character's name is, but she was sort of like the Wedge Antilles of this film, where she had a great presence, even though it was basically behind the scenes and just moving from plot A to plot B and getting some of that stuff done. It'd be interesting to see going forward what they're going to do with her character, if she's going to step up now that most of the ancillary characters are dead. I mean, I think we still got Nine Numb, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Princess Leia going forward, because they didn't change any of the ending here, and Princess Leia does survive the film, but they are going to have to do something to, facilitate her exit. Probably the next film will not take place immediately after, like this one did. It was interesting to see the crawl, because there really was nothing to say in the crawl, because we already knew that it was going to pick up immediately after the last film left off. So there was really nothing to surprise us. That's part of the fun of Star Wars, is the crawl. Because when you first sit down and see it on the screen, the crawl coming up, it's interesting to see where the galaxy is picking up from where we left off. In this case, we didn't even need the crawl to try to see what they would do with it, but they basically just said things we already knew in the crawl. So anyway, so yeah, I think they're gonna pick up a couple of maybe years after this film, and they could do it because they didn't really end it on a cliffhanger. They'll probably say that she died off screen in some, tragic manner, the way that the maybe the way the Revenge of the Sith had Padme die. Maybe it was just sort of her despairing the way the events were unfolding in the galaxy. Well, time will tell. Anyway, all right, let's move on to what everybody has been waiting for. Let's look at the Luke and Rey. We pick up where the first one left off, where is taking the saber from, and I don't know, quite frankly, for a laugh, he takes the saber from her and then just like chucks it over his shoulder. Um, it's amusing. I don't know. I mean, to be played a little more straight than that. But interesting, an interesting choice. There was a lot more humor. I finally found the picture. Here we go. There was a lot more humor in the film than I was expecting, and that was one of the moments that came off as generally funny. All right, so this is going to be a difficult one. All right, so we have Luke and Rey trying to convince him to be her teacher, that she has some calling to the Force and she's going to the galaxy needs Luke Skywalker, the Jedi must return, and Luke just pretty much throws everything away and just continues to you know you know what I mean, tell her to go away. It's a very strange take on the character, and I feel so bad for Mark Hamill because he feels it too. I mean, when you hear all the interviews with him, he didn't see Luke Skywalker in this, and I don't think any of us really do. Eh, when we left off with The Force Awakens, Leia is trying to find Luke desperately. She sends out her best pilot. People that knew Luke the closest, which you would think he was one of them, Luke was trying to find the first Jedi temple. Is that Luke was trying to find something there that would help him in his quest to defeat the dark side, to beat Kylo Ren. That's not what happens here at all, though. He wants to hide. He wants to live by himself until he dies and stay out of the fight and stay out of the fray. is not the Luke Skywalker of the original trilogy. Now, obviously, here could work if they played it like I said, where he was trying to find the answers. Luke Skywalker from the original trilogy was nothing if not loyal. He tried to help Han. Of course, it didn't really work out too well for him, fighting Darth Vader, getting his hand cut off, and finding out a terrible truth, but he tried. He was willing to put aside the big picture in order to save his friends. Now, and of course, it carried on into Return of the Jedi, where before anything else, he had to save Han Solo from the clutches of the vile gangster Jabba the Hutt. But here, he's failed Leia. She's fighting this battle on her own. He's failed Han Solo. He wasn't there to protect him when he was going to be killed by his son, something that Luke should have been able to sense. Of course, Luke, we learn, has cut himself off from the Force, and he's not, or so to speak, so that he can't. So, this is not the Luke Skywalker of the original trilogy. Hamill for that, because of all of us, I feel bad for myself, but of all of us, I think Mark Hamill was looking forward to playing his one great role yet again and doing it justice. To get that chance here. He doesn't really play Luke Skywalker the way Luke Skywalker was supposed to be played. Now, the relationship with Rey. All right, now he he eventually gives in. Nice scene. Let me bring that up too for a minute here. We had um the reunion between Luke and Chewie briefly. That was cool, and the reunion between Luke and R2. And R2 shows him the original message of Princess Leia, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi." And again, none of this really moves Luke. I don't know why. This moved him enough though, where he tells Rey that he's going to give her 3 lessons, which I think, if I remember correctly, he only gives her 2. But anyway, to stay with this point for just a moment, it was fun to see Luke on the Millennium Falcon, to see him interact with Chewie briefly, to see him interact with R2 briefly. Later in the movie, he will interact with Leia and very briefly C-3PO. Um, one of the big problems with the film is, and my brother said this, I'm going to give him credit for saying this too, because film feels like it's heading towards something big. They stop, they step back, and they go in a different direction. Now, you would think that in this film, once R2 does this, Luke would be on board. Luke would say, "All right, let's go, let's take off, and Leia needs me." Once again, Luke does not do what Luke would do in this film. What would Luke do? The classic, what would Jesus do? What would Luke do in this case? And the answer is, whatever you think he would do in the original trilogy, he'll do the opposite here. And so he decides to give Rey 3 lessons in the Force. Again, I don't mind so much they want to make him a reluctant teacher. I liked the concept of that line where he says, "I've only seen power like this once before. It didn't scare me enough then. It scares me now." So get with maybe he's a reluctant teacher. The same way they're doing with Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back, they were trying to do with Luke here. Not a big issue. But he has to be able to grapple with this, you know, fear. And one thing that the Jedi are not supposed to have is fear. And that's what Luke is. He's scared in this film. He's scared. He's scared. He's terrified. They make him wimp out. And that is not something I ever seen in Luke Skywalker. Now, with the training, the first training, I thought that was cute. They had Rey reaching out for the Force, and then Luke does something that you imagine Yoda would do, and he taps her hand, and he's like, "Do you feel it?" And she's like, "I feel the Force." And then he whacks her hand with a branch. That was cute. So this first lesson was cute, and then she goes to the dark side, and he ends up kind of wigging out because she went to the dark side so easily and sensed the powers of the dark side. Then the second lesson is the one that stymies me. His second lesson is basically a lecture on why the Jedi are so bad. Now, his reasons don't really add up to what we've seen in the saga, all the films. He goes back and he says the Jedi allowed Darth Sidious to come to power. That was really not on the Jedi. They their mind their ability to use the Force was diminished, and Sidious clouded their vision. Their minds were not really able to you know, cloud that he's shrouded them in. That's not really something you can pin on the Jedi. Then he says that a Jedi trained Darth Vader. Trying to put the blame on Obi-Wan doesn't seem like something Luke would do yet again. It's very difficult for me to see where Luke is coming from on this when he's grasping at straws to try to explain away the Jedi being, you know, arrogant and so forth. Now they haven't he doesn't focus on that fact because Yoda even says in Attack of the Clones the Jedi are too sure of themselves, they're arrogant. We know the Jedi Order from the prequels were not, you know, this spotless, stellar body that always got it right, that didn't do things wrong and didn't have an amount of arrogance and hubris, as Luke says, that caused their eventual downfall. But he's not focusing on things that, you know, would really point to the Jedi being too full of themselves. He's pointing to things that are pretty much beyond the Jedi's, what was beyond the Jedi's, you know, pale. They couldn't have anything. They had no Sidious. It wasn't their fault. They didn't create Sidious. They, you know, Obi-Wan didn't create Vader. It's just, it feels very much like he's grasping at straws. And you feel like, at least I felt like slapping him upside the head and say, Luke, you know, try better. Try a little harder. Try to come up with something, buddy. Because if you're really against the Jedi, I mean, come on. And they had him change his robes to something less Jedi-ish looking. Part of the problem with this film is an inherent problem with these films in the sequel trilogy. I think it's going to also carry over to the next one, is that there is no cohesive whole to it. You can tell in this film, you know, the first one was started by J.J. Abrams, had the input in writing and so forth. This one was written by Ryan Johnson. The next one will be written by J.J. Abrams again, apparently, with somebody else who knows. Whole. There are a lot of questions raised in The Force Awakens that are not answered here. And yeah, I mean, and that in part could be left to J.J. Abrams, but a lot of these questions that aren't answered, it feels like they're unnecessary to be answered now. Um, let's get to the next thing that I'm talking about with Ray in the cave. Now, this is another scene that, you know, harkens back to The Empire Strikes Back, but ultimately is unnecessary. Nothing is learned here, and they were trying for that thing with Luke where he sees himself in the Vader helmet, and ultimately, it's just a scene that could be cut. Nothing was really accomplished there. Uh, to the mystery of Ray's parents, and Ray wants to know who her parents are, and she thinks going in this cave she'll find out, and of course it turns out that she just sees a reflection of herself. That is like one of the primary questions that everybody had going into this film. Are we going to find out Ray's parents? Because a lot of people were expecting it to be Luke, maybe it being a relation of Kenobi. I was hoping it was going to be um daughter. Uh But eventually we find out, again, we're jumping ahead a little too much here, but let's get to this, since we're on this, you know, this path that we're discussing right now. So she has these conversations with Kylo Ren. I actually liked those conversations because it felt like it was something that was kind of a carryover from the original trilogy films, where you had in The Empire Strikes Back, of course, Vader calling to Luke, Luke able to hear him. In this, they can more than hear each other; they see each other. They actually physically touch each other, and it's a very interesting thing that they have this rapport. And I kind of thought that's where they were going, that they're siblings. I think maybe a lot of people were probably thinking at that point maybe they are siblings. Of course, it doesn't turn out to be the case. At least coming from Kylo Ren, he says, um, "I saw, your into your mind or whatever, and you must know the truth, and the truth is that your parents just sold you out. I guess they were drunks on Jakku or something, and they just sold her off and to Core Plot or whatever his name was, and I don't know. That didn't make no sense to me. That didn't make any sense to me. I don't have a problem with it not being a relation of Luke's. I mean, they kind of rolled themselves in a hole where they couldn't show it being Han and Leia's daughter because the way they kind of handled the Force Awakens, it was a little strange. They I didn't want it to be Luke's daughter because Luke wouldn't have a wife and this and that. But nobody was fine up until the explanation of why she was so powerful in the first film. Um, there's no explanation for that because we don't know her bloodline. And one might say, "Oh, okay, well that doesn't matter because anybody can be a Jedi and anybody can be that powerful." Well, no, not really. You can't really master the Force the way she did without any training. Being able to do all the tricks. That was the one problem I had with her in The Force Awakens. And I even said, you can look on my review of The Force Awakens, and I said, if it's explained why she has these Force powers, why she has this concentration of midi-chlorians, which I knew they would never get into, but if there was an explanation of why she was that powerful, I could deal with it. About her being so powerful in The Force Awakens, being able to do the Jedi mind trick, levitation. But now knowing that she has no ties to the Force or the Skywalkers or anything like that, it is raising more questions than, they can conceive answer at this point. So that was disappointing in a sense to me. I think they should have made her the brother of Kylo Ren. So let's get to the let's stick with this for a moment. The Luke and Kylo Ren backstory. They gave us a few flashbacks, something that doesn't really happen in Star Wars, but we got a few flashbacks to see the between him and Kylo Ren. So we hear from Luke that Kylo destroyed the Jedi Temple, and then we hear from Kylo in this forced communication that Luke tried to assassinate him in sort of a wild-eyed fury, and in a rage he tried to kill him in his sleep. And so eventually Rey confronts Luke about this, and they have a half-hearted fight, which was probably the most exciting thing Jedi-wise in this movie. The Jedi were like not very exciting, let's put it that way. But and then Luke tells his side of the story, which of course is obviously a more reasonably faithful indication of events, where he felt Kylo's dark side powers within him, and that he had basically already sold out to Snoke, and that for a moment he was tempted to just kill him in his sleep in order to prevent, a great catastrophe. And but he hesitated, and it was just a fleeting moment, and then Kylo wakes up and finds Luke over him with the lightsaber, green lightsaber by the way, which was cool. And of course that's what is the catalyst to bring Kylo over to the dark side. I think that was okay. I didn't really have a problem with that. I mean, possible that I think even the Luke of the original trilogy could have seen something so horrific in Kylo's future that he might have been tempted for a scant second. But again, we even hear later on in the film Luke saying, "I failed you," the same way that Obi-Wan says to Anakin. But it doesn't really feel earned because we don't see him failing him other than this one instance. We really don't see anything to justify why he's going to do this to Kylo other than we just trust Luke Skywalker can feel things and it's, for the best. And of course, even Luke can't carry it out, understandably. We don't really see, what led Kylo Ren to this place where he was. And again, it's a very incomplete backstory. That's what I said about The Force Awakens is we start aftermath of the story. The story was exciting, and then we just picked up at the end where it's trailing off and there really isn't much meat to the story anymore. For example, now we have Kylo Ren. It would have been interesting to see him fall to the dark side. What was Snoke promising him? How did he how did he meet Snoke? Where did Snoke come from? We don't know. We probably will never know now. We'll get to that in a moment. Um all right, so that was interesting. All right, continuing on. All right, we have the scene of Luke and Yoda. Yes, Yoda shows up, and that was a good scene. I enjoyed it a lot. That was one of the few things that I was anticipating, and they did it, and they did justice to it. If for no other reason, I really was happy that now Weird Al's prophecy of Luke playing against Yoda while he's old and gray did come to pass. Um, Part of the problem with this scene, though, now Luke is going to the Jedi library, so to speak. It's just a shelf with a dozen books, and Luke wants to torch this library, which is in an old tree. And he kind of decides not to do it because he really can't bring himself to destroy the Jedi scripture. And Yoda shows up and basically does it for him. They tried to bring back a spark of the Empire Strikes Back Yoda, where he's a little goofy and laughing, and I don't know if that felt out of place. Luke Skywalker, which he always called him Luke. I thought that was a little odd too, that choice. And again, it didn't really seem to explain why Luke was so cut off from the Force. I mean, I guess he wasn't allowed appearances from Yoda and so forth. So like Yoda is finally coming back to sort of set him straight. And the problem is he really doesn't have any dialogue that's memorable. And that's something that never happens with Yoda. Yoda is usually great for the memorable sound bite. And he really doesn't have it here. He kind of recycles the always looking to the horizon, to the future. And, you know, he kind of recycles that from The Empire Strikes Back a little bit, but he doesn't really have a memorable, sound bite that I thought probably would have saved this conversation. But we basically get the gist of the idea, and he makes a joke out of "Pictures have you." Uh, Not a very easy read, something like that. He says, which was pretty humorous, and he's basically trying to say, that the Jedi have to continue, they have to go forward, they can't go back. Of course, I don't really know what the Jedi scriptures have left to offer the Jedi because apparently this would be where they got the prophecy for the chosen one and the prophets of the Jedi. They foresaw that the chosen one would bring the Force back into balance and so forth. What these scriptures are needed for now, nobody knows. I mean, we don't really get into that here. But so yeah, it was nice to see Yoda again. They realized him pretty well. I think it was CGI still. Maybe it was it a puppet? I'm not sure. But he was realized really good. It was great seeing them two together and having a conversation. That's what I was looking forward to with Yoda, and at least I got that. One of the few things I probably did get that I was hoping for in this film. All right, so that was fun. All right, we got to move on here now. Let's see what else do we have. All right, let's get to the big confrontation. All right, so now we have Ray. This was pretty much, people were trying to compare this to The Empire Strikes Back. This is what was sort of recycled from where Rey the conflict within Kylo Ren, and she thinks that she can draw him back to the good side of the Force. And since Luke is still being a pain in the butt and won't take the lightsaber and won't, give her official training and won't, get off his hiney and, get in the Millennium Falcon and help out, she thinks that she can get help from Kylo Ren if she can just, reach him before he completely succumbs to the dark side. Up sort of like Luke did in Return of the Jedi. And as you might expect, Kylo Ren does like Darth Vader does in Return of the Jedi and turns her over to Supreme Leader Snoke. Snoke is interesting here. He looks pretty cool in this film because in the first film there was a hologram and you really couldn't get a feeling for space. Now, we got that throne room scene similar to the Emperor in Return of the Jedi and Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith. They take it in a strange direction. Now, Snoke, we don't really get any background about his character. Again, as I was alluding to earlier, we don't know anything about Snoke. How did he get in this place of power? Who taught him? I mean, we didn't need to know that with the Emperor until the prequels, because then we hear the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise. A lot of people thought Snoke was Darth Plagueis the Wise. We don't know who he is. We don't know anything about him. We don't know what his grand plan is, his main plan. All we know is that he's obviously a pretty heavy hitter in the dark side. He uses the Force lightning, like I was saying he probably would, and he does briefly. He's basically toying with Rey, and then he wants Kylo to execute her. And this is sort of his initiation to the dark side. Now, killing Han Solo obviously wasn't enough because he's still conflicted, and so now he has to kill Rey, and then using the Force, however, he turns on Snoke using Luke slash Anakin slash Rey's lightsaber to cut Snoke in half. Now that was, on the one hand, unexpected. So you think, well, yeah, wow, that was different. But on the other hand, I don't know. Now, a lot of people are taking issue with the fact that Snoke can't feel this, that Kylo Ren's doing this. I don't have a problem with that, because as we've seen the Emperor in Return of the Jedi, once they get into sort of a fixed mindset, the Sith, they're not necessarily going to sense some kind of betrayal like that. And he seemed to be on a rant about how Kylo Ren was going to be the greatest Sith or whatever he's going to be to him. So I didn't mind so much that he didn't sense that Kylo was turning on him, but what I did mind is that the biggest heavy hitter in the galaxy, the biggest dark side user since Darth Sidious, since Emperor Palpatine. And he basically goes out getting snapped in two, and he's done. He's done. How are they going to bring him back? He slumped on the ground in two, with his tongue hanging out and his eyes rolled back. There really isn't anything else they can do with this character. What are we going to hear? His backstory now? It's a little late now. It's a waste. It's a waste of a character that was potentially going to be pretty interesting, but they didn't want to do the same thing as Return of the Jedi, where he's going to be the Emperor pulling the strings until the very end, and then he's going to get turned on. So they turned on him in this film. But that leaves Kylo Ren as the main villain, and I don't know if he's strong enough to carry the film now as a villain. We don't know the backstory of Snoke. We don't know how he lured Kylo to the dark side. We don't know what happened to the Knights of Ren. Or showed up again. Were they still in, function during this time, or did they end up ceasing to be before the Force Awakens? I'm not sure. The movie doesn't make it clear at all, and we don't know anything about Snoke. And Snoke, I thought he had a very interesting look. I was under the impression that maybe they were going to lead to he was a clone of Obi-Wan, because he does. A lot of people are saying maybe he's Mace Windu. He doesn't even look like the same race as Mace Windu. He looks like he could be a Obi-Wan clone that took a baseball bat to the head. and maybe a blowtorch to the side of the face. He looks like he could have been an Obi-Wan clone, if not that, maybe a Grand Moff Tarkin clone. I don't know, but he kind of had that kind of look about him. And they had some interesting, you know, places they could go with this. But as usual, like I said, every time you think that they're going to go somewhere interesting, they try to do something different, and that something different usually turns out to be underwhelming. And so the dispatching of Snoke is very underwhelming. Uh, Not really understandable. All right, so all right, let's get over to. We're almost through my notes. We just got a few more things before we get to the big finish. General Hux, interesting character. I liked some of the subtleties there. He was, toying with the idea of assassinating Kylo Ren when Ren was unconscious. He's an interesting side character. I didn't have any problems with he's sort of the Grand Moff Tarkin of this saga, I suppose. You know, sort of pegged him as. We had some strange are in this film. We've got the I don't know, the little lizard nuns. I didn't know what to make of that. I don't know. It was very strange. You got Luke milking some kind of. Is that a muff? Is that what Han says? A muff milker or something? I don't know. We had some strange things. Um, Attempts at humor that they didn't really land, but then again, they weren't embarrassing, I suppose. Uh, interesting, interesting to say the least. I want to get to the. Oh, of course, I have to also mention we had the Porg, which turned out to be pretty interesting. I guess they inhabited the Millennium Falcon. They basically were there to irritate Chewie and make big eyes and pout at him. And it was they were amusing. I didn't have a problem with the Porg. They didn't overstay their welcome, and they just sort of added that little cute factor that Star Wars is known for. So I didn't mind them. That was fine. All right, so I want to get to the droids now. We got to talk some droids here now. One of my problems with the last film was in The Force Awakens, we really didn't see 3PO and R2D2 together. In this film, I don't think they even share one scene. One scene. Um, I'm not sure about that, but I'm pretty sure they don't. R2D2 has his one scene with Luke. R2D2 was always basically the lead of this team up between this team of 3PO and R2. R2 has gotten the shaft completely in these films. 3PO hasn't gotten much better, but at least he got a couple of lines in this one because I guess you got to give Anthony Daniels a reason for being there. Otherwise, they could just CGI him in the background, 3PO, and just have him pushing buttons on a console. But they actually, gave him a couple lines here. And what does he do? He has a little problem with the mutiny that's going on with Poe. He, you know, I like the little scene there where Luke walks over to him and winks at him. That was cute. Although I would have liked him to say a little something to 3PO after all this time. I mean, he did have a conversation with R2. He would have been nice to have him have a conversation with 3PO, briefly. But the droids really don't get a lot to do again, and I don't think this was originally the plan when it came to originally intended. What Lucas originally intended was the droids were going to be sort of the backbone of the stories. They would be the consistency. They would be the one consistent that what generation it was. They were going to be a constant. You would still see them providing the source of humor that they were known for in the original trilogy. And to an extent they did in the prequels. They didn't really get a whole lot of screen time in the prequels. R2 basically dominated the Phantom Menace, and then you had 3PO dominating, a lot of the comedy and the Attack of the Clones, and then of course you had R2, getting a big scene in the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. They felt like they gave them something to do in those films. I don't think they gave them anything to do in this film, at least not enough. And it was the same thing for The Force Awakens. It's like they don't know what to do with these characters. They do give enough, stuff to BB-8, and it seems like they just want to put BB-8 in and not share the spotlight with, the original droids, which in a way it's sad because I think BB-8 would be cool as a third party. You don't need to marginalize 3PO and R2 in order to get time for BB-8. BB-8 is sort of like the sitcom that introduces the cute little kid in the 5th season because they want to spark some interest in the show again because the show is sort of running on fumes and they want to get like another season or two in under their belt. And that's kind of what BB-8 is. I don't have a problem with him. I mean, of course, he serves his purpose well. He's funny and you know he did some pretty cool things in the film. Being in the Atst and being in disguise. It was pretty cute and inventive how they dealt with him. But I do feel like they really marginalized 3PO and especially R2 in favor of BB-8. And again, that's not necessary. I don't know why they felt the need to do that. All right, so let's get to the end now. The ending. We're going on here about an hour so far, so let's get to this big finish and finish this is. So they all wind up on the ice planet there, and let's see, on this ice planet, the no, it's not ice. That's right. It's salt. Before anybody corrects me, yeah, they made a point of showing that it's salt, and we had let's see, uh, Poe and Rose and Finn get in these little skimmers, these skimmer hoppers there, the dingle hoppers, and they attempt to take out the big cannon that's going to knock down the doors of the resistance base. And they finally cement that Rose has feelings for Finn, and they have her. It's a pretty strange thing. And Poe pulls out like Wedge, and Finn is going to do a suicide dive in order to destroy this cannon, and Rose, saves him by crashing into him at her own peril and kisses him, and that's basically the cementing of their relationship going forward. Now, a lot of people wanted to see Finn and Rey, and I've been completely opposed to that from the very beginning because Rey is supposed to dedicate her life to the Jedi. What did we see in all the films? That the Jedi dedicate themselves to the Force. They don't get into romantic entanglements. That's what brought down Anakin, was having that emotional attachment above that, and they're supposed to be at one with the Force. I'm one with the Force, and the Force is with me. But and people just wanted the shipper cults, and I'm glad they didn't appeal to the shipper cults and just, well, we got to put Finn with Rey because everybody wants to see Finn with Rey. No, Rey is supposed to be a Jedi, supposed to be into a romantic thing. She could be friends with him all day long, and twice on Sunday. But there's not supposed to be a romantic involvement there. Finn, there's no problem with him getting involved with anybody else, and Rose is fine. She's as good a candidate as anybody. So I'm glad they didn't do a Finn Ray pairing. Ray doesn't meet anybody until the very end. In fact, Ray doesn't meet Poe until the end of this movie. I mean, she didn't even meet him in the first movie. The film does have a little bit of that Empire Strikes Back problem. I kind of have that problem with Empire Strikes Back where Luke is so removed from the rest of the cast for so long. I mean, it's necessary because the Yoda parts are necessary, and the Yoda parts are so good that it makes up for it. But I mean, you really want to have the whole cast get together for more than just one scene, like in The Empire Strikes Back in the sick bay. That was the only time you had the whole cast together. Um, so yeah, so they cement that relationship between Finn and Rose. I think the reason really they didn't want to put Rey with Finn is the feminist leanings. They don't want to show that Rey needs a man. Rey don't need no man. Rey ain't gonna get tied down, no man. She's gonna be an independent woman. So whatever reason they did it for, whether they did it for the right reason or the wrong reason, they ended up doing the right thing. But I wouldn't put any stock, and they did it for the right reasons, which is to keep the lineage of the Jedi pure, that they are not supposed to engage in romantic relationships. All right, so Luke shows up again, and he got a haircut, and he's looking well, and he shows up at this resistance base, and kisses Leia on the forehead, and all this stuff here. As he's about, he gives her the dice from Millennium Falcon, which was cool seeing him in the Millennium Falcon earlier in the film. And so he goes out to confront Kylo Ren, and everyone's thinking, "Oh boy, this is going to be something." We're finally seeing the Jedi Master himself, Luke Skywalker, after 34 years. On the big screen, he is going to take care of business. He's going to take care of business like never before. They're going to write stories. They're going to sing sonnets about how Luke Skywalker got back in the saddle and went to this planet, I don't remember what it was called, and schooled all these fools. All the AT-ATs are pointing at him, and they start shooting. Kylo Ren is telling them to shoot, and they're shooting mercilessly, trying to destroy for a 10-mile radius. It's a little bit hyperbole, but they're decimating this ground to kill Luke Skywalker. And Luke Skywalker, when the smoke clears, he's still there, brushes the dust off his shoulder, and he's still there, and he is unscathed. And you feel Luke is a boss. You thought that Mace Windu was a boss in the Clone Wars cartoon. Mace Windu, get out of town. Grab your robe, you know, pick up your purple lightsaber and get out of town. Luke Skywalker is going to show you how it's done, how the Jedi kicked it old school. And what happens? Kylo Ren comes out with his lightsaber, and you're thinking, we're finally going to get a lightsaber battle to end all lightsaber battles. Now, may I just, because I forgot to do this at the Snoke scene, but let's go back to, for a moment there, Kylo and Rey fighting the Praetorian Guard. I think that's what they're calling those people, the Praetorian Elite or something like that. And that was an interesting scene. You had like some inventive, that was a very strange looking throne room. It was like this big red backdrop. I didn't mind it. That was fine. I'm just saying, basically a stage, like a sound stage or something. But these Praetorian elite had some interesting weapons. They got like a lightsaber made out of a staff. They've got a lightsaber that's like a chain whip. They got a lightsaber that looks like nunchucks. Um, and Rey and Kylo taking them apart. I mean, they're not pushovers, these Praetorian guards, but it's not really a lightsaber battle. I think that's what they were intending to give us for a lightsaber battle. That's not a lightsaber battle. If that was a lightsaber battle, that would have been what we got in the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, when Anakin and Obi-Wan take on Grievous bodyguards, and they have the pink staffs with the pink energy beacons on the top and bottom or whatever, and they're dancing around with those things. And if that's all we got in Revenge of the Sith, I would have been disappointed. I don't know about anybody else, but basically that was supposed to pass for what was our lightsaber battle in this film. And I guess they didn't want to have Kylo and Rey go at it again with the lightsabers. And because that's what they did in The Force Awakens, and you don't want to repeat yourself, I guess. But so they just got them bashing and trashing a couple of guys in red. All right, so now we're thinking, well, we're going to finally see the Jedi Master at work. Luke is going to light up, and we're going to go to town. But Luke is doing an Ali with Kylo. He's, float like a butterfly, and he's doing the rope-a-dope, and he's like letting Kylo swing that crazy-looking lightsaber all around him. He's doing the limbo with the lightsaber. Um, Luke confronts him with a line that was similar to Obi-Wan's, of course. If you strike me down in anger, you'll never be rid of me any more than you're rid of your father. Which was, of course, trying to evoke Obi-Wan in A New Hope. So Kylo, you know, and it was also interesting that Luke also had that line where, he told Rey, and I thought this was cool when he told Rey, you said three things and three things were wrong, basically. And he says the same thing here to Kylo. He says, "You said three things, and those three things are wrong because, he's saying, I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to destroy the Resistance. I'm going to destroy um, the Last Jedi." And he says, Luke says, "I'm not the Last Jedi," meaning Rey is. So Luke is stalling all this time while Rey is, using the Force to lift these rocks and stuff to, get them out of the tunnel, the rest of the Resistance. So come to find out, Kylo Ren takes a saber and pulls a one and just cuts him in half. And then, and we're thinking, oh, gee, this is, the death of Luke or whatever, but it doesn't take. And then he stabs him. It still doesn't take because it's just a Force image. A Force image is something we've never seen in Star Wars. Something new. How did this Force image begin? What created this in the Force to do this? So, in a sense, I'm thinking, well, this is a good way to save Luke for the next movie. Right. Think again. So Luke is off on the island concentrating and using the Force for the first time in a long time. And again, speaking of, Luke using the Force, the first time he uses the Force again, first time in a long time, that was an emotional moment. You've seen him reaching out and, he senses Leia and Leia is in the coma at that point and that she senses him too. So that, that was kind of a nice moment. But this is like the first time he's using the Force full on in straining his power. And this is enough to kill him eventually. Um, to that in a second. But the thing that bothers me most is Luke still never got off that friggin' island. We're waiting to see Luke Skywalker for the first time do something proactive in this entire movie, and the sucker isn't even there. He's using a mental image from like planets away to Ren. What the heck? I mean, I don't personally think that all of us waited 34 years to see Luke project an image of himself doing a rope-a-dope with Kylo Ren and then give up the ghost. And that's what I mean by, once again, the film doesn't pay off on its promises. The promise of seeing Luke Skywalker, it's not made good. I don't see why, and we'll start to wrap it up now, and I'll just basically give my overall thoughts. Film is they didn't off Luke Skywalker as a character did for the past 34 years, waiting for Luke Skywalker to get the spotlight again. Luke Skywalker is Star Wars. And what did he get in this film? He hid, he was grumpy, he taught like this false Jedi doctrine that really was no help to Rey and nothing that she could use, basically pushing her away, and she could have very well fallen to the dark side if not for the fact that obviously sure her mental or her moral fiber was strong enough to resist it apparently because she was close to in Snoke's throne room. Snoke goes out like Darth Maul. I don't want anybody to complain about Darth Maul anymore. You got Snoke, the greatest, Sith or dark side user or whatever he was in the history of the Jedi's confrontations. He's the most powerful enemy, and he gets taken out like Darth Maul. You got Luke Skywalker, who we never get the promise of Luke in battle, showing what he's made of, showing the greatness of the Last Jedi, when he's out hiding the whole time. The whole time. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And it just doesn't feel like Luke Skywalker. And again, I don't want to repeat myself too much, but I feel bad for Mark Hamill. And the problem is, they don't have people writing these movies who are fans. You give me fans of Star Wars, probably a good 90% of them in this. The handling of Luke Skywalker was poor. The overall story was long and, much of it unnecessary, quite frankly. There was some good action, there was some good entertaining interactions between characters. Like I said, I thought Rey and Kylo's stuff was pretty entertaining. But overall, this film just failed to satisfy as a Star Wars film. And I don't know if I was to rank it amongst other films. Like I said, I think the biggest claim to fame this film has is making me appreciate The Force Awakens a little bit more. That's a film that I felt, even though it was hollow and it was just going over the same beats of the original trilogy, it felt, or the original film, Star Wars, although they did, borrow some stuff from Empire and Jedi, but it did feel like it had a sense of fun, a sense of urgency, a sense of character. I think the only character in this film that was done better than in The Force Awakens was Rey. I think they didn't overpower her like they did in The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens, they just used her as the poster child for "I'm woman, hear me roar," basically. Oh, she can do everything, and then they got the backlash of it being a Mary Sue. And of course, they kind of backed down on that here by not making her so completely self-sufficient. She didn't handle, you know, the whole world and then some. Basically, Kylo Ren is the one that saved her from, you know, Snoke. It didn't really seem like she was overpowered. But Finn, arguably, was much better in the first film. Poe, again, didn't have a whole lot to do in the first film, but arguably stronger characterization in the first film. Han Solo. Now, I objected to what they did with Han, taking him back in time and making him a smuggler again, but you felt very strongly that he was Han Solo. Even Leia felt more like Princess Leia in The Force Awakens than she does here. I mean, maybe you can chalk that up to Lawrence Kasdan writing it, because of course he wrote Empire and Jedi, and he had a great feel for the Han and Leia characters, the relationship as well. But here, like Luke, you get a couple of glimpses here and there. Maybe when he's talking to Yoda, maybe when he's talking to R2. Um, maybe one or two scenes at the end, but they haven't done justice to Luke Skywalker, and the movie was going to rise or fall with Luke Skywalker. So I'm going to probably put this film under The Force Awakens, better than Attack of the Clones, which is still my least favorite film in the Star Wars canon. I don't know, because at this point, I don't know. I think the Attack of the Clones goes down a little bit better as a coherent film. I was never bored by Attack of the Clones. This film, it kind of felt like they should have got on track a couple of times. However, I think the mistakes of Attack of the Clones are equally bad to this film. Mischaracterizing the iconic legendary character of Luke Skywalker is an unpardonable sin. At the same time, some of the stuff in Attack of the Clones was so poor for me. I hated the stuff regarding Shmi Skywalker, and a lot of the, you know, sort of melancholy of that film was depressing for me and not pleasant. I don't think this film was probably as unpleasant as Attack of the Clones, although I don't think at their best in this film they reached some of the best scenes of Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones had some good scenes. It had some great action scenes. I think the action scenes with Luke and Obi-Wan in the Coruscant nightclub and the speeder chase was better than, the horse stampede they had here with, you know, Finn and Rose, So in a sense, some of the highlights of Attack of the Clones were better, but I suppose I would probably still put this one over Clones. I don't know. Time will tell. This is only a first reaction video, first viewing. I don't know how well it's going to turn out. So I am probably going to give this film, if I say it's on par with Attack of the Clones, I'm going to give it the same rating I gave Attack of the Clones. I'm giving The Last Jedi 4 stars out of 5. Now, I don't know if that rating will hold up. Maybe it'll change in time after repeat viewings. Um, also want to mention John Williams, because I didn't mention John Williams in this. He scores the film again. I'm not sure if this is the last one he's going to score. I don't know if he's going to score Episode 9 because, he's in his 90s now, so God bless him for doing as much as he's done for us. But the music, of course, was great once again. Just, it felt like Star Wars. Um, Going forward, I don't know. Episode 9, what is there left? What is there left? I'm asking you. Let me know in the comments below. What is left for you in episode 9? Now, the problem with episode 7 was I said, I'm not really interested in what we have to see left. I wasn't interested in Rey's training under Luke because Rey already knows everything. Rey was already great at everything and she didn't need any help. Um, Luke, stepping back on the saddle was the only thing that I was interested in. Um, you know, Snoke, we don't have Snoke anymore. What is the big mystery about Snoke? Everybody had theories up the wazoo about what Snoke was. We don't know. It's irrelevant now. What do we care about what happens to Snoke? What happened to him? How he came about and everything? It's over. Kylo Ren, I don't know if he's strong enough to carry another film all on his own. We don't have Luke anymore. We don't have Han anymore. We don't have Princess Leia anymore because unfortunately Carrie Fisher passed on. So of course that was, beyond their control. What's left? Bring in Billy D. Williams, I guess, and finally give Billy D a role as the last of the old guard. I mean, apparently they'll bring Luke back for a Force Ghost appearance, but what is Luke going to teach as a Force Ghost? To be able to say to encourage anybody as a Force Ghost. He threw in the towel already. What is he going to tell Rey to encourage her? What is he going to tell Rey that is going to be edifying for her? Nothing. He pretty much threw in the towel. And that's not Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker gave up his training to save his friends. Mark Hamill, I'm going to tell you right now, could have written a better Star Wars trilogy than what we're getting here. Mark Hamill knew the way this character would act. He knew the way Luke Skywalker was supposed to behave. He said in many of his interviews, I think I've heard him tell the story on more than one occasion, that when he saw the saber move in the script that it was going to be uh, out of Kylo Ren's grasp, he expected it to go to Luke. And he thought Luke was going to come just too late to save Han because he sensed Leia sensing Han, and that he was going to come to the rescue because that's what Luke Skywalker does. Luke Skywalker cares about his friends. He don't hide. He doesn't take the easy way out. When the time came for him to save his father, what did he do? He gave himself up because he had faith. This Luke doesn't have faith. This Luke does not emulate the traits of the Jedi. So to be called the Last Jedi, it's not doing Luke justice. To even call him a Jedi in this film. And Mark Hamill, God bless him, does the best he can with this. But that is not the Luke Skywalker that he wanted to play or that I wanted to see. And in this script, to Mark Hamill, to let him write, he would have come up with a better film. He would have written the Star Wars film we all wanted to see. He would have had interactions between Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Han Solo. That's what we were waiting for. We wanted to see that. We didn't want to see Luke hiding off on an island because they didn't know how to write him. We needed a fan to write these scripts. Mark Hamill would have been the best choice. He is the best Star Wars fan of them all. Out of all of them. I mean, Harrison Ford came back because, he wanted to send the character on his way. And Carrie Fisher came back because, well, what else is she gonna do? I mean, come on. She didn't have a great career in acting beyond Princess Leia, so that was fine. Mark Hamill, this was his heart and soul. This is what he was known for. know, he became an icon for. And so this should have gone through his hands. Now, have other people write it with him and, maybe give him just a script polish. Just let him do a treatment. Let somebody else flesh it out. But they should have gave this script to Mark Hamill and let him doctor it. Let him, touch it up. Then we would have gotten the Star Wars film that we deserved. Both of these films are not the Star Wars films we deserve. And I don't see how they're gonna bounce back with episode 9. Um, I'll see it, I'm sure everybody will see it. We'll see the final fate of Rey and Kylo Ren and Finn and whatever. But what am I looking forward to now in episode 9? Nothing. They ruined Luke Skywalker, so even if he does come back as a Force ghost, what good is that? What is he going to accomplish? If, Kylo Ren, you know, has a final confrontation with anyone, it's gonna be Rey, and we've already seen it, and they had a good chance there to do something different and have Rey fall to the dark side. That was something a lot of people were like, contemplating might have been an interesting choice. But it probably would have been for the best. Then you would have had Luke have something proactive to do in could have appealed to one or both of them in the final, you know, act. And he would have had to step off that island and do something proactive. All right, so I've saved this for last. Let me talk about the last scene with Luke. Well, technically the last scene in the film is what? The stable boys. And I thought that was another thing that was ridiculous. It was pretentious. Oh, man, a lot of this film was pretentious. I've never seen Star Wars pretentious, really. Um, I think in the prequels, they skated it. It was borderline. They had a few moments of political intrigue and or they talking about current times and what have you. But this was a little more, we had the animal, suffering that they had to address, and then they had the who's financing the military. They play both sides. What difference does it make? We had the rich are getting wealthy off the back of the poor. And it just felt like a lot of that could have been cut out, and we didn't need it. We didn't need it. And then we had, the apparently the force sensitive boy at the end there. Now anybody can be a Jedi and just do crap, apparently, because he just pulls the broom over to him and no training. That was not the way the Force was supposed to be. Why did you need Jedi Masters if you could learn how to do these things on your own? Be a discipline. And you're going to tell me like this 8-year-old kid just disciplined himself to know how to use a, broom? And you could tell me, well, what about Anakin? Anakin was the chosen one, for one thing. Anakin was the chosen one. If he had any powers, it was basically foresight. He could see things before they happened. That's why he has such great reflexes. He wasn't levitating things. He wasn't, mind controlling people with the Jedi mind trick. He wasn't doing that crap because he was the chosen one. He had some foresight. He had some skills. But they're really straining this concept that the Force just can get tapped with a flick of the switch, with a snap of the fingers. It's, a very strange concept that they're placing on the Force because the people that are writing this don't understand the Force. George Lucas should have never sold Star Wars. He should have wrote the scripts, give them to someone else to write. I mean, give them to someone else to film. Give them to a director. He would have had executive producers say and would have been able to, tweak it the way he did with Empire, the way he did with Jedi. Of course, Jedi he was more hands on, but instead, as he himself said, he sold it to the white slavers. He sold them down the river, and basically you can do what you will now to Star Wars. There's not really anything you can do about it. And like I said, I don't even feel angry, really, because it's kind of like I knew what we were going to get after The Force Awakens. I knew they didn't know what they were doing. I knew they were just doing it by committee. I knew it was a corporate filmmaking. It wasn't going to be some artistic project. And you have people at the helm that don't really get Star Wars. I heard somebody say it was akin to Zack Snyder and what he's doing with the DC films. Of course, now he's done finally, but you have someone that doesn't understand the core principles of what the material is all about. People that just see the peripheral, surface of Star Wars, but they don't understand the characters. They don't understand the nuance, the mythological nuance. It's not just copying the original films. It's the nuance of, you know, and soul of the mythology of the characters. We don't really get that here either. That was one of the great standout things of Star Wars. All right, so wrap it up. Let's wrap it up. Again, like I said, I'm not really even angry. I'm just disappointed that because there was like a good framework here. They had a good framework. Like I said, I always said I like the characters. I like Rey. I like Daisy Ridley. I like John Boyega. I like Oscar Isaac. They are not at fault here. They are not to blame for anything that goes on in these films. They're good actors and they're doing a good job of what they're given. The problem really is that they have not done justice to the original trilogy characters. They really haven't gotten in touch with what makes these characters who we loved in the first place. And it shows. It shows. I think an apt description would be the way I described The Force Awakens when I said the danger is like The Godfather Part 2, the original trilogy is like The Godfather, and the sequel trilogy films are like The Godfather Part 3. It's a pale imitation of the originals. Um and they're just not going to get to that level. I knew that after The Force Awakens, and that's probably why I'm not as disappointed because my expectation levels Force Awakens. If they couldn't get, you know, a scene with Luke Skywalker with Han Solo, they're not going to understand what the core concept of Star Wars is. If they're not going to get Luke Skywalker to help Han Solo when Han Solo was about to be killed, they don't understand the concept of Luke Skywalker. And it's sad. It's sad more than it makes me angry or anything. I'm just disappointed that we had our shot and we pretty much lost it. It was squandered. The shot was taken and it was wasted. Let's take a look at that final scene. And the final scene was Luke finally giving up the ghost. This film felt like it should have been the end of the whole saga. That's the way the saga should end, with Luke giving up the ghost. Now, I will admit, I liked that scene. If Luke was going to go out, I didn't want him to go out getting killed by Kylo Ren. I didn't want him going out like a punk. I didn't want him going out giving himself up. I didn't want him going out like Qui-Gon, where he was like old and just couldn't do it anymore and just got killed by a younger apprentice that was. I didn't want him going like Obi-Wan and just giving himself up and trying to save everybody by dying. So this was the best way he could have died, but it should have happened in episode 9. I understand why they want to do it now because they want to bring him back as a Force ghost. But I think it would have been much more effective if his final moments of giving everything he had, twin sons, like he did when he was young in A New Hope, that was a very powerful image. And that should have been something that ended the saga. And the way he disappears and the robes flutter and he finally is one with the Force, that was something that spoke of finality. That spoke of Luke finally going through his hero's journey, coming to the end, coming full circle, so to speak, to the end of his journey. But the story isn't over, and I felt like they should have had him doing something that would have helped the overall, complexion of the battle for the resistance at the end, and not do it here where nobody there's nothing left for the sequel to tell us. There's nothing left for the sequel to go to interest us. And so while it was a beautiful scene, it should have been the final scene of the final movie. Cue credits. That's the end of the saga, the base saga as we know it. But unfortunately, alas, it was not to be, and we are going to back as a Force Ghost, maybe. I mean, you would have lost that Force Ghost if you let him die at the end of 9, but that's what I was hoping they would do. But again, at least, he went out on his own terms, Luke. It's just he never left that friggin' island. Oh, man. Luke Skywalker hiding on an island. Oh, man. All right, that's all I got. That's all I got for you guys. I'm always real with you, and yeah, that's basically all I've got on Star Wars Episode 8: The Last Jedi. I hope you enjoyed my in-detail review, spoiler review. I don't think I mentioned that at all, but of course it's going to be in the title, so you know spoilers here. Um, yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. A lot of people, a big backlash that hated it, didn't like what was going on with Luke. I haven't heard all the reviews. I just seen the film yesterday, and I'm trying to catch up on what some other people are saying. But of course, I just gave my opinion without. I don't care what anybody else thinks. Um, some people love it. Again, I am not really being judgmental for people. If you love it, that's fine. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I didn't hate it, but at the same time, it was still disappointing in the way Luke was characterized, and the overall structure of the film wasn't that great. You know, sloppy, overlong, some adjectives I could use. Um, and again, you know, we didn't get the films we deserved. Mark Hamill didn't get the film he deserved. He should have wrote this film. I'm gonna go, you know, to my last breath saying that. I think Mark Hamill should have wrote this film. Uh, that's about it. That's all I got. Uh, if I don't, I'm gonna try to do a show on Saturday. If I don't do a show on Saturday, let me be the first to wish you a very Merry Christmas, and I hope Santa's good to you, and I hope you enjoy the festive seasons with your family. And there's only one more thing to say, and that's this is Johnny Torch reminding you once again, the Force will be with you always.